So when Michelle and Allison and I met a couple months ago, they said to me, will you just speak for this event on intimacy with the Father? Well, first of all, this is one of my topics. I love it. But here's the other side of that. Intimacy with the Father is between you and Him. So on rare occasions at a weekend away, God would have me speak and tell a story of what He did in an intimate time with Him. So to tell you that I'm uncomfortable doing this is an understatement. I told my husband, it's not that I'm not confident about who God is in me. It's not that I'm not confident about my speaking gift. It's not any of that. This is different. This is different because usually there are certain things that we keep to ourselves and that He has just for us. And it makes us know that we were created different than everyone else and special. So what I need to let you know first off is, this is my disclaimer. If you come away from today thinking, wow, she has a great relationship with God and I can't live up to that, then I have greatly failed in why I'm here. My reason for being here is that the picture that God showed me was embers. Even before I knew this was about Fan the Flame, I didn't know that was the name. So, because we talked before y'all even had that name, I saw embers, and God said, lean down and blow. Lean down and blow on them. Because that's what I want you to do. I want you to make them hungry. So my goal today is to cooperate with the Father to make you hungry, because the thing you think about God and you believe about God is the single most important thing about you. It is the single most important thing, and it guides your life in a direction that you could never imagine. I had never would imagine this. Okay. What I'd like to do is pray over us to start out. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for the beautiful people in this room. Lord, I bless the leaders of this church and of I Am Healing, of Spirit and Truth, those that work together to plan this. God, you give me opportunities, and I am so grateful that they trust me with the people that God has put in their care. Lord, I'm just asking right now, you've already told me, you're doing the speaking, and I can just cooperate. And that Holy Spirit's already on the stage, and He's going to be the translator. So I just welcome you up here, and I ask, Lord, if there's any area where I'm off at all, that you'll just make me invisible, and they'll hear you, and they'll see you. And I thank you for that in the name of Jesus. So, I've got to tell you a little bit of a story. This story, and most of what I'm going to be telling you today is a story. I'm not going to have you pulling open your Bible. I'm really sorry about that, but I will go ahead and challenge you. If you want a relationship, a tight relationship with God, get in the Word and go through and say to Him, show me every place where people were intimate with you. There's a lot of them, and there's a lot of fruit that came from that. So I challenge you to go do that. I was a happy, positive, fun-loving, creative child with a very big imagination. That's my mama. Okay. I was loved, surrounded by family and church family, nature. I lived out in the middle of nowhere, and it was wonderful. I had to wear shoes to 3 places: church, school, and if my daddy wormed the dogs, and that's it. Those are the only 3 times. So that tells you sort of how I grew up. And as a pastor's kid, I was saturated in the church and in the Bible and all these rules that came with it. Now, the hard part of that was, I'm just going to give you one example of what rules meant to me. I realized, looking back at this, the rules were my ways to please and appease God. Like the song that Karen sang a while ago about all this stuff where I'm not going to take your grace, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it about me trying to do something for you. That was what I learned and grew in. There was there was a time, and it's happened many times, and I've heard it in some of your lives too. I've heard it around at church. We're sitting around a table. This is common, and I would hear, "Hey, wait, pray over your food or you might choke." Y'all ever heard that? Do you know what the impression of I got from God? He is that petty. He is that vengeful. He is that superficial that if I forget to say a prayer that he's going to choke me, a child. There was something that came up in me. So the impression I got was that God was more interested in what I wore. And how he didn't really know about my heart. It was more about what the outward appearance looked like. I know that some of you can relate to that. And if I broke the rules, I could expect, I imagined God as someone with a lightning bolt waiting to, or even worse, when I was corrected. Not always, but I would hear often, even from the enemy speaking to me, "You're not even really saved." I was saved at 6 years old. So that was a lot of sin coming. A lot of sin coming after 6 years old. A lot of choices, right? My mom had grace for failure. But my daddy, he had no grace for himself to fail or for us. And that's where I came from. So today I'm going to give you a couple guardrails. I'm going to start with the first one now. It's sort of like bookends. The first one is rules without relationship equal rebellion. So there, I got rules. Now, I'm going to tell you, some of these rules are really good. We have to have rules about how we're going to treat each other. We have to have some of these rules. But when we tag them on to God is not going to be happy if you don't dress like this. There's some unhealthy stuff happening. And in that, I'm not saying that we don't need to be modest. Y'all got to hear me. You're going to have to give me grace. So there's rules, but I had no relationship with God. Because the truth of the matter is my circumstances that I was living in told me that Jesus was going to keep me out of hell. If I knew Jesus and I was his friend, he'd keep me out of hell, but God wasn't safe. As a matter of fact, some stuff happened with my dad, who I told you was a pastor, and I came away from that into my teen years saying, actually, Satan and sin are stronger than God. That was the lie that attached to the trauma that I had. It's big. Sin is so big. And sin was focused on where I lived and all around me. So I looked really good on the outside. I'm a pastor's kid. I'm the youth director. I'm all that stuff. I helped lead worship. I played the piano. But on the inside, there was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of shame, and there was a lot of control building up, and I was mad at God. And all that together equals rebellion, right? So that's what one side of it looks like. You may recognize that. Now, enter into that. There has to come a time where something changes or we waste our entire lives in that place of thinking that God's angry with us and that it's all about rules and that's all there is. I work in discipleship, adult discipleship, and I work with children. And my goal with children is to help them learn what they need so they don't grow up to be broken adults where they have the equipment. Okay, so I'm going through this program in adult discipleship, and there is a story that I want you to hear because it encapsulates what happened with me. The story that I needed to hear. It's called The High Rise of Life. Some of you have heard it. Creation takes place on several levels. There's the seen and the unseen to us, right? There's stuff we see and stuff we don't see. To God, it's all seen. I'm going to talk about just what this high rise looks like. In the lower levels is where humanity lives, fallen humanity. The lighting is dim. There's a limited ability to see what's really going on. Humans do the best they can to figure out, but they have limited resources. They have limited sight, limited experience, and they take the limited truth they have and they say things like, there can't be a God, I can't see him. Or they start bickering amongst themselves because it's so limited. It's like enclosed and you don't have a lot of windows. Then the middle level. And the middle level, the lighting is better. And it's where the spiritual being that we can't always see. Some of you may have seen angels at some point or a demon, but in that middle space is where the spiritual beings occupy that space. There's a lot of fighting going on. If you've ever been called into a season where you go in war and you speak what God's saying, you know what that looks like. It's a place where those who are the angels of light are listening for an order from the Creator, and He tells them what to do, and they go do that. And vice versa, the enemy of God is giving orders to the angels of darkness, and they're fighting also, right? Now, here's the problem. The humans are involved in this level too. Because when the glory of God, when the beauty of God, and when the passion of God is on us, there's a target on our back. And the enemy hates us. And so he comes after us, right? He comes after us. They speak down, they give ideas down into the people in the lower levels and say, are you sure? Are you sure about that? Come on. And we get paranoid. We get paranoid about what's going to happen. And then we start thinking, wait a minute, that person's my enemy. Let's fight each other. So that's what we do. You can see it all over the world and in church too. But there's another level. There's an uppermost level. Where the Creator is, there is all the light we need. There is a broad view. You can see the big picture. And there is peace there. And the peace is because if you take the time and go up and you look and see what He's doing, He is not upset at all. God's not upset. It's where He resides. And the truth of the matter, in the Bible, it says you were created to be seated in holy places, in heavenly places. Do you understand that? That is where you belong. Now, enter the Creator into a bodysuit, a human bodysuit, and He comes into the lower levels. And He starts walking around and talking to those who will listen and saying, you were created for more. You were created for the upper level, and there's more than you know. Some listen. He'll say, this is the way. There is one way. Follow me. I'll lead you all the way up the stairs. I've got a Holy Spirit that's going to be your friend, and He's never going to leave you. He's going to go with you. You are never going to be alone. Sometimes it's hard for us to remember that, isn't it? When a person arrives at the top, I'm telling you this from personal experience. I felt blind because my eyes were used to living in dark places. I had no idea. I'd been taught, my dad was a warrior. I'd been taught to get in that middle space and fight. The problem was, God didn't tell me to do that. I had not heard from Him yet. Some of you, He will call you into a season where you're supposed to be in the middle spaces and fight. But if He doesn't, you're wasting your time and His. It's up to every one of us. We cannot follow what other people are doing. We have to listen to God. And guess what? Our pastor, they may be saying to us, Chip may be up here, and he may have this call. What I think the call in his life is, his call is to hear from God, go back into the low places, and tell people there's another way, and to come out. Right? That's right. Well, there's all different kinds of things. If we are called to intercession, He'll put us in that middle level. And we'll fight, and then we'll get exhausted, because that's what we do as humans, and we go back. We go back to Him and say, what's next? Did I do this well? When I read this story, it encapsulated for me, I'm not supposed to live in that low place. I was caught there, but I'm out. I'm not supposed to live in the middle place. I'm meant to go up those stairs, past the people that have given out and gone to sleep, laying on the stairs, past the people who have passed out because they weren't in good enough shape to get up the stairs. And I'm not talking physically. I'm talking about our laziness spiritually, right? And I'm meant to go up there and hear from Him. And the truth of the matter is, every one of us are. That's what we're made for. That was where I began, that kind of idea, the picture that was given to me that said, you're in the wrong space. We're moving somewhere else. Now, I guess it's the day to quote Bill Johnson, because I have something he said that absolutely wrecked my life. I cannot afford to think a single thought in my head about myself that He isn't thinking about me. So let me think about that. Who tells me what God says? I can get it from the Word. There are some things He says in the Word. There are things He says from my pastor. There are things I said from my Bible study teacher. But the truth of the matter is, it's my job. I have to go to Him, sit myself down, have my stuff out, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and say, what does it look like? What are you saying about me that I can say? Because one of my problems is my tongue. One of my big problems, historically, generationally from my family, is that we speak death rather than life when we're people who are only supposed to speak from life. Correct? Okay. Now I'm going to tell you something that's going to offend some of you. So I'm going to ask for grace. I'm going to ask you for grace to just go home and fight this out with God. Because I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So I heard a pastor, an older pastor, tell this story, and he said, when I was young, I was in charge of, at my big church, my job was to go retrieve the people who were at the airport who were going to be conference speakers. And I'm supposed to go get them and bring them back from a very large airport. And he said the administrative people would circle the picture of the person, their name, and their bio, so that I would know who I was going to get. He said I would get in my car, I would read that, and then I would lay it on my seat to go get them. And he said, how many of you know that I don't yet have him in my seat? That what I have is the bio. I have the brochure. I'm going to tell y'all, this wrecked me. This is the brochure of Jesus. This is the brochure of God. And it tells me about Him. And it tells me what He looks like. And it says, if you will follow Him, these are some of the things it will look like. Here's the problem. We stop here. He wants to be in the seat. He wants to be my closest relationship. It's why I learned the Bible. It's why I learned to quote the Bible. It's why I have to stop and say, where does the Bible fit in this? I'll be honest, in my walk with the Lord, He's had to say, Cindy, you didn't understand that correctly. Other people translated it even wrong. Now, I know this is risky. I know this is risky to say this. Not all of them are correct. Not all the translations are correct. Not all the paraphrases are correct. Every, sorry. Okay. Just saying. Okay. Now come up to the place in my life where I crash. If you haven't crashed yet, I want to say this over you gently but clearly. You will crash. We all come to a place where we have stuffed the garbage in, stuffed the pain. We have done all of that, and we keep moving forward. I just got to keep moving forward. And all of a sudden, we run into something, and we can't go forward anymore. We are done. It could be something that's done to us. It could be something that we participate in. It could be our own sin. It could be an accident. There's all kinds of things that happen to create a crash. So I'm 32 years old now. 32 years old. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old that I'm homeschooling. My husband works 4 days a week, 12 hours in Atlanta. So he's gone a lot. But then when he is home, he was a very driven person with a lot of goals. He was either 6 days a week, he was working. He was flipping houses, he was building, he was painting. And the time that we could spend with him either meant we either had to go with him to work or we had to go with him to watch him play ball. He's still good at ball. I mean, he's got a gift. I always say if he'd been a foot taller, he would have been in the NBA, and he would never have looked at me. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful. He is exactly who he is. Yep. So I'm pregnant, and I am put on bed rest at 6 months because my baby is trying to come early. And they put me on medication, and I'm in the bed rest. Oh, how do you do that with 2 kids? How do you do that when you have to cook all the meals and you don't eat out? How do you do that and save money? I can't have somebody come in and clean my house. It was a very frustrating time. The medication that they put me on, I know now, but didn't know then, and they didn't know then, causes severe depression. And it not only does that, people committed suicide while they were on it. So I'm writing. I'm a writer, so I write in my journal, and I'm noticing that it's getting darker in my journal. And I'm like, I got to do something about this. So I tell my husband, who has 0 tools to deal with depression. He didn't know what to do, and he didn't do anything. He didn't know what to do, so he just didn't. And then I go to my pastor, and he wrote me a prescription. The prescription was read 5 Psalms and 1 Proverbs a day. I'm like, okay, Pastor Donnie, I'll do that. The problem was I already knew. I'd already done that. I already did everything I knew to do. One day my mama calls me, and she says, how are you doing? And I said, man, this journal's getting dark. As a matter of fact, what I'm finding is that I'm starting to think inside my mind and write that my family would be better off without me. And I'm actually finding that I'm writing that, even more than that, I'm thinking of ways to do that will harm as little as possible. Harm them as little as possible. And my mother, who usually, often I'll just say, overreacts, did the opposite of that. She said, you're in a pit. You are in a pit and you can't see out. She said, here's what I'm going to do. I just bought this Bible study. It cost me a lot of money, and nobody at church signed up for it. So I'm going to send it to you. I said, I already went through the Bible, Mama. I'm reading 5 Psalms and 1 proverb a day, and it's not doing it. And she says, this is it. So I get it. I watched the first video, and this very southern woman, she's a new author. I start watching her, and something inside of me came back alive. I'm a learner, lifelong learner. I'm a lifelong teacher. I've been teaching my baby dolls and my sisters to read from when I was little. So I know, my mom knew I was a teacher. But what happened to me was, as I got in the Word, I started realizing not only do I love studying, but she was saying that the Father actually wants me to be healthy. And He actually cares more about me than He cares about what I do. And that was where the crash happened. That was where the turn started. Fast forward 10 years, and we come into what I call the divine acceleration. Okay, the divine acceleration was Robbie and I get invited to move to North Carolina from Georgia. We have lived in the same place for a long time. I never thought he would leave. We took a job in the Balsam area, and we're working there, and we were invited to a church, New Covenant. It was the healthiest season of our life in church of healing. I can tell you that what we saw before we ever went to a class, there were people that were forgiving each other quickly. There were people that were not offended with each other. There were leaders that were real. They did not just try to teach you something. They lived it out in front of you. We were just like, what is this? We want that. We went to a class called Restoring the Foundations. And there was a divine exchange. God said, if you'll hand me these generational curses, I'll hand you generational blessings. I'm like, I'll take that. If you'll give me your unhealthy soul ties where your connections to people that have to go, I'll give you healthy friendships. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. If you'll give me that pain and that garbage and the lies that have stuck to it, if you'll hand that to me, I promise you, I'm going to heal it. And not only am I going to heal it, I'm going to tell you the truth that goes with it, and I'm going to leave a scar there so you can help other people. Isn't that beautiful? We went through ministry sessions where God just broke stuff off of Robbie, our daughter Sarah, our oldest daughter Sarah, and me. It was amazing. And then God set us up in 2015 when Pastor Nick Honorkamp, some of you know him, he hired us on as pastoral staff. And one of the women in the church came to me and just said, hey, this thing right here, we're missing something at New Covenant, and it's discipleship. And this is the program for that. So I just went to the pastor, my boss, and I said, can I go to this other church and take it? Can I go take this and see what it's going to do? And y'all, it's like the puzzle pieces. There may be a different catalyst for you, but it was like I saw a table, and God started pulling all these pieces together. Here's the generational blessings. Here's the healing from your soul ties. Here's the healthy relationships. Here's the Father. Oh, my goodness, I got to tell you, this is crazy. While we were at the retreat, I got to have 2 years with the most godly man I know, Dr. Jim Brackett. God did something because I believed that God was angry. I believed that he did not care. I believed that he was waiting to harm me. And Jim sat with me patiently. He wouldn't let me take notes. I'm like, no, I take notes so I can go back over. And he said, no, the healing's going to happen in here. I sat with him, and he sat knee to knee with me. And then he would say something to me, and his face disappeared, and God's voice would come right out and would say, baby girl, I love you. And as that love came out and went inside, the lies had to come out. The lies had to bubble out and be dealt with. That's another piece that was pulled into the table. And he started putting this all together for me and showing me what it was going to look like. Now I'm going to talk to you about fruit because this is exciting. There is fruit when you start pursuing God and you stop resisting him. The first thing that I noticed, and this is what I say, is God wants my healing more than I do. Right? I just prayed and said to the Lord, I've got this prayer that I pray that I don't even say out loud very much except to him because it is so scary. I cry every time I say it. But I'm going to give you 2 pieces of it. Just anything, anytime. When I started praying that, I started waking up in the middle of the night. And I would wake up because I heard him say, Cindy, I cannot wait anymore to spend time with you. And I'm like, what? That sounded like someone that loved me. It's in Psalm 27. Oh, I got it closed. And David speaks about it, and he says, I hear your voice say, come talk to me, and I run. I run to you. If you read the Song of Solomon, you're going to hear it over and over and over again. It's so beautiful. I would jump out of bed as soon as I heard that voice. I never even I had my house coat right there. I ran downstairs, and I had my table set up. I had my Bible. I had my journal. I had my pens and my highlighter, and I had my concordance because I wanted to know what I didn't know. Right? So I started digging with him. My pastor also spoke into me in such a great way during that time. He said this crazy thing about that there are these multifacets to God. And he's like this big diamond. And all the way around, everywhere you turn, if you walk around him, you're going to see a different facet of God. So some of you might say, we met Rapha. And some of you might say, I know him as Elohim. I know there's all these different names we know him as. Pastor Nick took it to another level. He said, I said to God, hey, righteous judge, what do I need to know? And he said, I'm glad you asked, chief repenter. And he said, did you know that God calls me chief repenter? And I said to God that day, you're no respecter of persons. And if you're going to call him a name, I want my name. I want to know who I am. And so I started pursuing him. So I'm going to give you 2 names that God's called me. I have several, but these are 2 of the names that I'm just going to tell you. You get to go after who you are. Go to him and ask him. So years ago, after I'd done that first study, I was in a ministry for banners. We did Name of God banners. And we had to do a deep dive study. And I did a deep dive study on a word I had never heard before. It was in the Hebrew, and it was called Quana. And it is jealous God. Jealous God. And I had done all this study about it, done a banner. I come back 10 or 12 years later after Pastor Nick's told me this little idea, and I said, okay, we have some unfinished business. How can you be jealous and it not be a sin? Who were you jealous of, and what were you jealous for? How can there be a godly jealousy, and what does that look like? And he said, well, I'm glad you asked me, my little pit bull. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. I am a nurturer. I am someone that creates safe places for people to heal. I don't like pit bulls because I've seen what they can do in a dangerous place. And do you know what he said to me? You're right, but they're also loyal. And they grab onto something and they don't let go until it's done. And that is who I brag to my friends and call you. There was another time. He showed me a picture of his hand. And I was talking to him as my healer. And I saw his hand out. And then I saw him reaching. And he would take a piece of a heart and put it in his hand. All these different parts. And then he reached over and took my hand. And he used me to start sewing that together. He said, you're my seamstress. And I'm sewing people's hearts back together. You'll sit with me when I'm bringing their heart back together, and I'm using you to help me sew. And now they can love me with their whole heart. I like that. You know what happens when you find out who you really are? When you get those names, those nicknames from him, you stop trying to be other people. You stop trying to be somebody else, and you get to just be you. Another thing he did, there were a couple of studies that I'm just going to tell y'all about, and you can write them down if you'd like to, if you've not done them. One is Secrets of the Secret Place by Bob Sorge. Some of you may be familiar with that. That study is 52 lessons of going into deeper and deeper intimacy with him in your secret place. You can do it as a study with other people, or you can do it by yourself. The other one is 4 Keys to Hearing God's Voice by Mark Virkler. Now, I'm just going to tell you, I did that study, and he was not my favorite teacher. It was a hurdle for me to jump over. He's very old school, very linear, left brain, very black and white, and it just wasn't my teaching style. But I did what he said. He gave us a lesson, he gave us homework, and I did it, and guess what? God talked to me. And he did it a lot. And all it is two-way journaling. If we got a time in a minute, we'll practice a little bit of that. Another thing that he did was he taught me about, some of y'all know Charlotte Reimer. She started handing me all these videos and these CDs, and I am just, every time that I'm not homeschooling or I'm not at the church working, or if I'm, things that I hate to do, wash dishes, cook, the things that I didn't absolutely love, I started carrying that little CD player with me everywhere. I'm listening to it, I'm painting, I'm doing whatever I got to do, I'm doing it with that, and no time was wasted. That was part of the divine acceleration. When she did that, I found out about supernatural sleep. Now, this is just a basic thing. You can go find out about it for yourself. If you got questions, you can come ask me, and in my limited amount of knowledge, I'll tell you what happened to me. So I heard this idea that your day starts in the evening. The Jewish clock, day starts in the evening, and the first hours that you sleep are the beginning of your day, and that's where God fills you so that and adjusts you so that throughout the rest of the day you have what you need to help others. So I just started praying, and I said, hey, God, I know there's parts of me that are already healed, but there's parts that aren't healed. And I'm resisting you when I'm awake. So I'm giving you permission. For Robbie agreed too. We prayed it over each other that you can heal me while I'm asleep in the areas where I just can't make the adjustment yet. Then I said, if there's any dreams that I need to have, I just give you permission. I give you permission to give me dreams that will help me, visions that will help me help others. The enemy no longer has access to my imagination. I grew up as a child with a big imagination, and there was a lot of fear included because the enemy came after that imagination. I gave him all of that, and crazy stuff started happening. I'm just going to tell you, crazy stuff started happening. Try it. Try it. Every bit of it I could go back and find biblically. This is how you know, if you can't find anything to corroborate it in the Word of God, then run. But otherwise, go for it. Okay, now I'm going to give you one more. There was a time where I had a dream, a specific dream, and I've had many since then about this, but I was standing at like a doorway, and there was this, all of these ribbons and bead things. You know what do you call that? We used to walk through in the 70s. What do you call it? Yeah, it's like that curtain of beadwork and all that. Well, they were red. And I knew I was supposed to go through it, so I just walked through it, and it just came around me. And I walk in, and I'm standing in the throne room of heaven. And there are people everywhere. It's like this huge amphitheater all the way around. There are people on the floor. There are people jumping up and down. There are people with flags. There are these things swirling around everywhere that I don't even have words for. There's loud worship. There is loud singing and shouting and glory, 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 holy, holy, holy. And I'm like, whoa. It was a cacophony of something that I had never seen to that level. I'm standing there, and I can look down, and there's God, the Father, sitting on this throne. And his Son is beside him, the one who I did trust, right? That I did love. And I'm looking at him, and somehow in a dream, as dreams work, he's not any smaller. I can see his face. He's not far away from me, even though there's millions of people. And all of a sudden, I see this. He does like this. And I'm like, he says, yeah. And I ran. God had already been doing the work in me to remove the lies. And what I saw myself running. I had no shoes on. I was a child. And I had a dress on like I used to wear that my mama would let us even wear when it wasn't church time. And I would twirl it, and it would, you know how they do? Those twirly, dancy dresses. And I ran as fast as I could, and I jumped on him. And he grabbed me, and he laughed. In that dream, I could feel his hair. On my hair, I could feel his breath. I leaned back against him, and I could feel his heartbeat in my back. I could feel him squeeze me. And then one of my most precious memories that only he knew, my granddaddy that just died last year, about a year ago at 99, he would let me get in his lap anytime. He had a deep bass voice. And I would lean my head against him, against his chest, and I could hear his laughter, that vibrating inside of him. That's what I did to God. Because my granddaddy had represented him well. I knew I could do it. And I leaned against him, and I heard him turn to Jesus and say, I love her. I could feel that in his chest. Something in me was just like being healed. Every cell of my body that didn't even know started waking up. I can't even explain it to you more than that. Now, let me tell you a couple things that happen when you're in his lap. Here are just a few. I probably have 50 stories that I could tell you from being in his lap, but I'm going to tell you about three or four things that happened. The first thing God did was, when I was learning this, was he said, Cindy, we got this problem with offense. You're easily offended. I didn't know Elaine was going to be here today. God sent me. I just said to him, tell me somebody that's not easily offended and how to get this right. And one night, God showed me in a service, he just pointed Elaine. He just put like a highlight on her and said, she's your person. So I sent her an email and I said, may I have 1 hour of your time? I have 6 questions for you. Here are the questions. And she said, well, I'm in Texas right now, but as soon as I get back, I'll meet with you. And she sat down with me for 1 hour, and I kept my mouth shut. She talked, and she told me how she became to be someone that is not so easily offendable. And then I made changes, and she held me accountable. That's what it looks like. That thing right there, I was sitting in Papa's lap when he said, hey, this thing about offense, let's take care of this. Whew. I need that. We all need it. I hope you're hearing that almost none of my journey towards God's heart is done by myself. Do you hear that there are people involved in every aspect? It's the reason the enemy tries to keep us away from healthy church and healthy people. Another thing that he did is he started putting sin in its proper place for me. I told y'all that I always thought sin was so big, even bigger than God, because I kept falling for it. So I'm going to give you a quick story of what happened. This is just one scenario of many, and many more that I know I'm going to have with God about sin. I was sitting in his lap in total just peace, total acceptance. And he says, hey, what you think about Sadie? Now, some of y'all don't know Sadie. She's 12 and a half now, but she was born when I was 44 years old. And our oldest son was 23. And our youngest kid, was she 12? Rachel was 12 when Sadie was born. And we'd lost 4 babies between. 4. And we gave up. And then we get pregnant, and I'm like, I don't even know if I should hold out hope. Truth, being truthful. So the Lord brought Sadie up. He says, what you think about her? And I said, she's amazing. You had the best idea. I would never have done that. We have been blown away by this kid. We have so much more fun. We're not getting as old. We would get a lot older if we were just getting set in our ways. We get to go to volleyball games every week, right? So we're sitting there. There's no rush with God, just in case you haven't been in his lap yet. He's not in a rush. He's not hurrying your healing. He's not doing it. I'm sitting there, and he says, she's struggling, isn't she? I said, yeah. She's in middle school. She's becoming a young woman. She's dealing with the world and her culture saying this about her and telling her who she is. And you're telling her what I'm telling her, and it's the opposite. And so she's being torn in this tug of war. And he said, man, I love her. Then after a pause, he says, I heard what she said to you the other day. I heard how she talked to you. I said, yeah. He said, I know that hurt your heart. I said, yeah. And he said, I'm sorry about that. And then he took me in his arms and he squeezed. And I felt the healing come. The healing come from wounds that come from people you love. And then he paused a minute and he said, hey, you remember a long time ago you said that you knew that the breath inside of your body was from me? And so you told me thank you? I said, yep. He said, do you remember when you told me that you were going to use my breath to say what I'm saying? I said, yes, sir, I remember. He said, that thing you said to Sadie when you reacted the other day, that wasn't me. I said, you're right. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I was wrong. And he said, of course I forgive you. Of course I forgive you. Just like that. And then he says, I love you. And I said, what do you want me to do about it? What do you want me to do about this? And he said, I want you just to go tell her that that wasn't me. I didn't say that. I don't think that about her. That's how we undo the lie of the enemy. That's how sin, dealing with sin really looks like in God's lap. When we deal with it there's no need for it to come out in front of everybody unless it's for God's glory. It gets dealt with in a private place. What I found is, I told y'all that rules within relationship, without relationship equals rebellion. Rules, this is the other side, rules within relationship equals safety and swift obedience. That's what God planned. That's how we stay in the middle of the road. We don't want to go towards rebellion, but we want this. This is exactly what we want. Y'all remember in the Bible where Moses came down off the mountain of Sinai and his face was glowing because he'd spent time with God. And it made everybody else uncomfortable. It doesn't say Moses was uncomfortable. It doesn't say God was uncomfortable. Everybody else was uncomfortable. Do y'all remember when Stephen was being stoned and his face showed the presence of God and he was able to forgive while he was being stoned? I bet, I can just imagine that when Jesus went and spent time with his Father and came back to his disciples, that he looked different. That even he glowed with that. That is the other thing that I need to tell you today comes from spending time in his lap. There is a glow that comes on us that is absolutely beautiful. And it says to us, it says to others, hey, they different. I want that. Okay, so I'm going to tell you one final story, and we're going to, and then we're going to go on to our other. We're going to move on. Let me tell you what overflow is, actually. Overflow is a fullness and intimacy that comes from spending time with God. We can't make it up. We can try to pretend, but we get depleted really easily because we leak. Right? We have to go back to him over and over. I believe prophetically that every time that the word overflow is used here, that it's actually saying we choose to operate from a place of intimacy with God. From that is the fullness instead of lack and rules, because we don't know who he is. Now, I'm just going to tell you on one personal note what this looks like. I go to Walmart about 3 times a year not because I'm a hater, like some of you are, but because our budget cannot afford it, okay? When I'm planning to go to Walmart, I've got a long list. So my list this time, back early July, looked like back to school and Bible school. It was a long list. I mean, I think I had 2 buggies. I'm very intentional when I go because here's the deal. God does not send us out for no reason, ever. Ever. He doesn't put us in families for no reason, ever. He is very intentional. So when I'm going to Walmart, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to take about 2 hours, so I'm going to plan 3. I'm going to plan 3 because I'm expecting to see somebody with either a nose cannula and oxygen, or somebody on crutches, or somebody in a wheelchair, going down the aisles. I'm not there at a busy time of day if I can help it, but I'm going and looking for the people who God says, that one right there. Go touch them. Okay. my bigger plan even, because I know I'm going to do this every time, is I'm not going in self-checkout. I'm going to wait in the long line and see who needs touching, who all is ticked off because they're having to wait in a long line because there's only one cashier in all of Walmart. I'm going to stand there and I'm going to say, God, what do you want to say about what they're saying? Which child do you want me to bless? That kind of thing. And as I go through line, I get up to the cashier, and here's the intention. This is how I'm intentional. I say to her, call her by name, and I say, hey, a few months ago you weren't quite finished with your first year of college. How'd that go? Hey, you said that you were about to have a new nephew. Tell me about him. What do you like about him? What is going on in your life? One thing that's happening in your life that you are blown away by. As I'm standing there talking to her, interacting with her and my $400 worth of stuff or more, I feel something come by me that is really dark. Now, when you spend time with the Lord, you may not even recognize it, but there is an atmosphere around you of worship that when you go out, you glow and people can sense it. They may not even know what to call it. But there was a dark presence that came by me, and I felt it before I saw it, and I heard what I call pit language. Pit language is when you have been in the pit, you talk like that. And it was ugly. It was really ugly. And she's walking by as fast as she can, and she's got a plan, and there's a kid beside her, 15, 16 years old, a boy, and he's like hunched over like this, like he has had this his whole life. And he's listening. You know, I don't know. It was bad. And she goes all the way up, and she turns at self-checkout, and she's facing me like 10 rows over. And she turns all of that venom, all of that poison on the self-checkout manager. And after a minute, I hear the manager say, I'm calling security. There are people everywhere, y'all. There were people, it was back to school. People are there with their kids getting school stuff. The woman stomps out. She's very angry. And I felt the Lord, out of the overflow of what he had done in me during the night and my time with him in the morning, say, I just felt it. First of all, what has that woman lived with in her life that is her experience? God sends someone to show her, send someone to reach in and pull her out. And then I said, that boy, all I could see was a picture of a big toxic waste dump, and he's swimming in that trying to survive. And I said, God, you say you go after the one, go after this one. What would it look like if you healed him and he found out who he really is? And then I walk, because I'm leaving, and I walk up to the woman, the man, who has just had to put up a wall. I heard her going around and saying to people, I'm sorry you had to hear that. I'm sorry for your children, that kind of thing. But people were saying, I'm sorry. And she was saying, it's okay. Because you know what she did? She did what we all do when we're in a place at work or wherever, and we can't fill our junk then. We have to just box it up and wait till later. And I go towards her, and I stopped right in front of her, and I looked her in the eye. And I said, I am so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry. And she started to say, and then I believe she encountered God. She encountered God. She didn't see me, she saw him. Because he was overflowing out of me. And she did this with me. We did it together. She went, and then she said, thank you. Thank you. And then I said, you have a great day. And I turned my buggy and I went out. That is what you hear. I'm not going to take the time to read it to you, but in John 14, when Jesus says, you are going to do greater things than me, that's what it means. Nobody has to get the credit but God. Go be who got out of the place. You don't have to come up with anything. He does it. He does all the work. When you go spend time with him, something comes up, and the word that you've studied you're passionate about, the feelings that you've gotten spending time with him, that safety and that loving care, come up out of you. And all of a sudden, you're like, how did I do that? I need you to hear this. You're created for this. Nothing less will do. Nothing less will do. We're going into a time in our history of the world where you are not going to be able to be the other kind of Christian. You got to know for yourself, because there are going to be times when you're separated from people. But you will never be separated from him, and now's a really good time to practice. Okay. So I want to speak a blessing over you, and in a few minutes we'll come back. Miss Jennifer's going to speak, and then we're going to have ministry time. So for all of this. And I want to speak a blessing over you now that I read this morning. And then I want to, during ministry time, I'm going to explain to you a couple of things about what that looks like. What journaling with God and that kind of thing looks like. So here's the blessing. If you'll put out your hands, if you are used to receiving from God. I speak to your spirit. And I bless you with the great joy that comes from experiencing the presence of God. Sensing him watching over your life. I bless you with experiencing the joy of his presence in private and in public worship. I bless you with knowing his presence in the night watches, as Sherry was speaking about. As your subconscious mind and spirit are open to the Spirit of God, so he can minister to you while your conscious mind is not cluttering things up. I bless you with sensing the presence of God in those things which the world calls problems and pain. Looking at them, knowing that he's got a plan, and he's going to use that yucky, icky relationship or thing, and he's going to bring glory. I bless you in the name of Jehovah Shammah, God who is always there for you. In Jesus' name.